me, like, I have really good pieces, but I don't want to overuse them. I want to do it for a specific event, like the grown and sexy one. I want to do a really new and fresh piece for that.
Shoot, let's talk about it. First and foremost, Ms. CraftedByTash, welcome to the Nitty Gritty Sit Down. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. You know, I have to say, you know, I wish I had hit record a little bit earlier because that conversation was dope.
It was a really dope conversation.
You know what I'm saying?
I was like, dang, let me
you know, like trying to save it,
and
that's kind of the things I want us to really like focus on is, you know, not only do we have an opportunity to do it in this beautiful place, we get to sit here and hear about another local wonderful talent, how we met, just happenstance. And I gotta just tell the audience real quick how this worked out. Having a nitty gritty. Well, first we talked on the phone, talked in email, and like the day of, you show up and you're like, hey, can I go on? And I was kind of like, oh, hey, you know. And then you were like, did you get my audio file now? And I checked it and I'm thinking, yo, you said this today.
Yeah, everything was like, poorly planned.
I was like, all right, cool. Like, look, came through the audio, but you're going up last, okay? And he was like, cool, bet. And you were just hanging around, and I noticed that you knew everybody else, and then you got on the stage and shut that show down. Like, that was the best ending to the Nitty Gritty event there was. Like, hands down, the epitome of what I hope every open mic is like when it comes to that climax of the ending. Tell us, what created the poet that created that poem?
I would say a lot of heartbreak, a lot of traumatizing experiences in my childhood. And I didn't have a bad childhood. It's just, I feel like a lot of the things that I've done when I was a kid just kind of inspired all of those, like all of that emotion. And then for that piece specifically, like that was inspired by an event in my life. That piece is close to my heart. And I don't know if you know, but that's a 5-year-old piece. That piece is 5 years old. So I invested a lot of emotion, a lot of preparation into that piece. So it is pretty close to my heart. But me as a poet, I've been a poet for most of my childhood, most of my adolescence, and yeah, I feel like that really kind of drives me because I always have a lot on my mind. I always have a lot on my mind. So like writing is one thing that helps me just relieve the stress, relieve the overloaded mind that I have. Like writing is just like my getaway, if that makes sense. So yeah. So that's me.
There's another part of that, a little bit of what you said, like that's a 5-year-old piece. And the conversation that we had before we hit record was doing a piece so much that you feel like it loses its impact.
Yeah, that for a fact.
If that was a 5-year-old piece and there's that fear of losing impact, what made you perform it that night?
You'd be surprised. Like, even though that was a 5-year-old piece, I've only done that piece 3 times. And that event was the 4th time I've done it. So the very first time I did it, it was for like a project. I was in a poetry club and we had to make a 3-minute piece, but my piece was like 7 minutes. But it was just whatever came out of that piece is, yeah, I've only done it 3 times before that performance, and it's always been impactful to me because I held on, I sat on it. I knew it was a great piece. I knew it was. It was like, one day I'll get it out there. One day I'll get it out there. Like, but I felt like that moment was a perfect moment to do that. Like, yeah, because people was there to listen, and there was a lot of powerful pieces before that. It was just like, it felt perfect. Like, it was just perfect timing for that piece. So I really feel like that event that I did it at was like the most impactful event that I've ever been in, to be able to like to touch that audience. Because the audience that's listened to that piece before, like, they were okay. Like, they was like, oh, that's amazing, that's great. But like, they weren't true poets. They were just like,
they're like, wow, she knows words.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like the impact wasn't as deep and profound as I wanted it to be. So I always just sat on it because I was like, not everybody's going to want to hear this depressing poem. Like, it's very like, you have to pick and choose when to use that poem because it's a very deep, violent poem. So yeah, I always just like was really selective of where I did that poem. So that's an old poem, but very...
I didn't even think about that poem as deep and violent. Deep, yes.
Yes.
But I always thought of more of that intrusive thoughts come to fruition. Like those embedded negative energy that people will have sometimes, and they just keep it in their head, right? But sometimes people just have those thoughts, and then it just came to light, like a person who's experiencing abuse disassociating with themselves, only to come to a wake of, this is their reality. Yeah. You know, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I also loved what you said about the space, and that was the audience, and they was receptive in a different way than other audiences, you know, and we pride ourselves on that at the Nitty Gritty, that finding that comfortable vulnerability, that people are there to hear that type of work, that caliber of poetry, and that level of performance, because even though you were stationary in one spot, the way you were moving your hands, your facial movements, the voice affliction, it was the whole thing was just amazing.
And so I prepared for that poem.
It was.
I took acting classes, but not for specifically for that poem, but like along the years that it was the result.
So speaking of that, I want to touch on that because I know where you're going, and everybody before they've had this amazing gift of, during their breakdown of one question, answering 3 more, right?
Okay.
So I want to get a jump and ask you, to let you proceed, what inspires your creativity and influences that create your artistic style?
My poetry. So inspiration is still something I'm working on, but sometimes in moments where I am inspired, it's because instrumentals that I've listened to or whatever that was on my mind, or if there's a situation that I'm going through that I feel like is kind of weighing on me, I just write about it. So yeah, recently I've been writing a couple pieces, and then sometimes if I'm like meditating, something just comes to my mind, like a couple words, and then I just try to bring it to life, if that makes sense. So yeah, instrumentals, meditating, situations in my life, and just whatever comes to mind, basically. And I have the strangest and most random moments.
Talk about
when I'm getting inspired.
For example. Yeah, we're going down that one.
Yeah, so sometimes when I'm lacking inspiration, obviously this is not something that most people should do. I don't recommend if you're not. But sometimes when I'm just need inspirations, I do mushrooms sometimes.
Nothing like a little micro dosing to get it going. Yeah, like a micro dose sometimes.
So that also helps me with inspiration, but it's not like a casual thing. It's like when
there's intent and purpose behind it.
Exactly. There's always a purpose behind it when I do it, because sometimes it never goes the way I want it to. But you also learn lessons from that. And then also just life lessons. Like right now I'm in this stage of my life where I'm like, everything's a lesson. Every single thing's a lesson. And it's like things like that. It's like, geez, like hard lessons and like hard truths are also met like potent inspirations, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's what it's been for me recently, and in the past too. Heartbreak has been my source of inspiration, but those pieces are pretty sad, so I try to stay away from those.
Well, you know, that might be something to think about.
Yeah.
In addition to the new pieces that you're creating for the event. With the grown and sexy theme, it was always a worry, because when I realized it was the lovely lady lineup, it's like, dang, I don't want to portray the women in a way that it's like grown and sexy and people have the wrong impression. Yet every single one has portray their feedback and thought on what their idea of grown and sexy is and what they want to do for it, and it has been simply amazing, and it has put me at ease, because not only was everybody's idea like on the same page, but they already had ways they wanted to expand upon it and bring it in. What is your thoughts, ideas, message that you'd want to interpret when you think of performing at the Grown and Sexy?
I would want the grown to be the hardship and the struggle that we have to go through as individuals, as a grown individual, as an adult. And then the sexy is more like to the intimate and romantic side of things. So that's where I'm looking at it, because I do have two pieces that I want to do. One is pretty like intense when it comes to hard lessons that adulthood does bring, and the spiritual correlation with it. And also for the sexy parts, like, yeah, like romance is something that I'm trying to dig more into, because everyone wants to have that romance in their life eventually, the romance that they really admire and love and also cherish. So that's what I do want to bring to the table. So those two aspects, if that makes sense.
It does, and I appreciate that. So once again, in the situation where you're answering things that I haven't even asked yet.
Okay.
For example, can you share some of your favorite pieces or projects that you've worked on? I think you just did that.
Yeah.
Are there any specific themes or messages that you aim to convey with your art? I think you did that. This one I think you touched on, but I'll ask to see if we already went there. How do you engage with your audience during performances or exhibitions? And I think that first piece we were talking about was a good example, but you care to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Okay, that's a good question. My pieces, I try to convict, I try to trigger people. Because if you're not convicting or triggering people, how can they engage? How can they feel what you feel, if that makes sense? So that's something I don't intentionally do, but it always ends up that way, because most of the time when I'm making my pieces, it's really me talking to myself, basically. So it's like I'm convicting myself in most of my pieces, but some people will also feel convictions within my pieces because they're also probably going through things that I'm going through. So it's like, I like that because it's pulling them in. Like, it's making them feel like they're a part of something that I created, if that makes sense. So it's like, I do like that, and I want people to feel that way and also learn from it. It's not just to make you feel bad or anything. It's just to also help you see yourself within the eyes that you're not alone in this situation. Yeah. And
I like that.
Yeah. And a lot of my pieces are definitely... it's also deprived from self-discovery, and also self-conviction and self-evaluation and things like that. So, and everyone's in different stages of their life, but no matter where you are in your life, I want my piece to connect with you, if that makes sense. So.
Now that we're talking about the engaging side of that, let's flip the coin and talk about the opposite, the setbacks.
The setbacks.
How is it that you work through those moments where you're not motivated to write, to perform, you're not feeling the art that you've created already, but you know the passion is still there?
Yeah.
How do you work through those moments?
I'm still working through those moments, because I know there's times in my life where nothing comes out. There's like a complete writer's block. I've literally gone years without writing, and that when I realized that I haven't wrote in a long time, and I know that it's still in me. I've done it since I was a kid, and I just try to push myself to find that inspiration. I try to push myself to at least write some things down whenever it comes to my mind. It doesn't have to rhyme. It doesn't have to correlate at all. It's just as long as I get it out, and sometimes that helps. But with things like that, I try to just kind of surround myself with things that can inspire me, and if it doesn't inspire me, I'll just let it organically happen. But in that time where I'm like, when nothing's happening, I try to surround myself with it. So like doing acting or something like that, or just trying to create experiences that can bring that different perspective. Because sometimes when I'm unable to create, it's because I don't have a different perspective. It's always a perspective that has grown old. So now I have to figure out this new perspective so I can explore this new perspective and just kind of dig deeper in that and create new pieces through that. So it's like, that's how I try to navigate within that blank space that I have in my life sometimes.
Okay, so, that's dope.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to figure out what works for you, and sometimes you just got to take a step back.
Yeah.
I like that.
And then just experience and explore life until it just naturally comes back. But yeah.
Well, Ms. Tash, I appreciate your time. Thank you for again coming to the Nitty Gritty Sit Down. Before we get out of here, is there any message that you'd like to convey to the audience?
A message that I would like for the audience to take with them is know your why. Like, know the reason why you're here. Like, sometimes poetry is that for some people, use that outlet. Use whatever gift that you have. Use whatever passion that you're passionate in, and use that to the best of your ability so it can not only bless you, but bless other people. Embrace your gift and learn to help people along the way with your gift. So, yeah.
Dope. Well, we look forward to hearing your performance on the 30th, for all the support you have, and we can give back to you. Thank you again for being a part of the Nitty Gritty.
Thank you for having me here.
Of course. All right.
Comes alive.
It was fun.